A very interesting, or at least unique and different tasting tonight, if the closure is any indication of this particular wine. The instructions said to chill, and I'm just about to pour a little bit of this wine in my glass, and I'm intrigued to see this really cool glass top closure. Makes me think about a certain series of wines. Principally, wines that I've seen with this closure are from southern France or from Austria. But that's not, anybody can use this closure. So fun, has a little silicone rim and the glass element that makes for a pretty special presentation. I think they're not cheap. I mean, they're usually, I don't know how much they are going for now. I'm sure somebody who's in the wine making world can tell me more about the pricing of this. But when I first came out, I was told they were about like $1 a piece. So there was an investment in putting these on a bottle. So for whatever it's worth, right off the bat, even just touching the closure, we know some things about it. And normally I don't look at the closure because it's a cork, and I don't want to necessarily be swayed by what the cork may or may not say about the wine or the producer. And so that's fun. But already some things to look at and take into account. Erica's joining us tonight, and Jen Fiorello's with her, which is great. And the Sanders are joining us tonight. And Kathy, hello, how are you? And Eric and Wendy, thank you for joining us as well. I'm going to pour this a little taste as others get online and join us. Oh, well, that's fun too. So is everybody else making discoveries about what we're going to be tasting tonight? Because this is not white and it's not red, so it's rosé. That's fun. Rosé is a challenge to taste. It's a big challenge to blind taste a rosé. So that's fun. All right, well, we get to chat about rosé tonight. Jen, yay. Yes, yay for the rosé. Yes. Custom Bombs are here. Yay for Thursday. Trish, Andy, and Kathy are joining us. Carrie's here. And the Burses, and Rob and Kathy. And Michelle and Olga are in the house. Very good. The rosé house this week. Oh, it's pretty. Man, that's pretty. How neat is that? We've never done a rosé on this tasting. For over a year's worth of production, or a year's worth of doing these, I don't think we've ever touched a rosé. Hello to you, Heather, and Leon and Kim. Wow, that's pretty. Okay, so rosé, huh? It's a full-on category. I mean, not that everybody doesn't probably already appreciate that, but when I began my wine career, rosé was still kind of thought of as white Zinfandel, something sweet, something that most people who were serious about wine were not serious or interested in rosé. And I don't think I had on any of a couple of lists that I had managed early on, or that I was taking part in helping to serve. We didn't have much in the way of rosé, maybe a little bit, and it certainly was seasonal. And over time, that rosé kind of category has blossomed into full-blown category, and now I get solicitations from distributors and from winemakers, dozens of rosé offerings and different options from all around the world. So from a blind tasting perspective, there isn't a place in the world where we can't consider, and every place is now making some form of a rosé. And I think it's probably appropriate to talk about a few of those places initially, and then we'll maybe see if we can start to dwindle down where this might come from. So let's do that before we dive into the actual evaluation of this wine. Rosé, what do you guys know about it? It's a wine that comes sometimes as a byproduct of red wine production, and other times as a very intentional production unto itself. And it can also be a marriage of a white wine and a red wine. And so a lot less of the red and a lot more of the white. You could tint a rosé and kind of make it colored the way you want to by adding some red wine or red juice to a white wine. And in the case of wines from the most famous probably region, the region that specializes most and produces the most of rosé would be Provence in the southern part of France. And the Provençal rosé is intentional. It's an area that can ripen red grapes, but typically they opt not to. And so if you think about the evolution, we talk about this a lot, right, in terms of a red grape, in terms of how ripe it is. If it's in a climate that has enough ripening potential, you can have a higher alcohol, a higher degree of alcohol, and you get more advanced ripe profile to the fruit. You get ripe fruit into raisiny fruit, dried fruit. But what happens in a rosé kind of production when it's very intentional, when you're picking grapes specifically to make rosé, you oftentimes pick a little bit earlier to maintain freshness. And when you pick earlier, you're getting some more tart fruit flavors. You're getting some fresh, but not necessarily dried or really ripe profiles. So you get wonderful aromatics and acidity, and you maintain that freshness. So let me back up a touch. When you're talking about rosé, one thing you can look at right off the bat is the color and the paleness of it. If it's pretty pale, there's an indication that someone's probably intentionally making this rosé as opposed to doing a bleed, or what is in French the term is saignée, to bleed off a portion of the red wine production in order to make a rosé from your ripe red grapes that were intended to make a more substantial red wine. And so your profile is going to be a bit different, a little bit more savory, a little bit more concentrated in fruit and darker colors. So as a result, you're looking at one of two kind of general categories of kind of an intentional rosé or a saignée rosé. And so this is something to think about here for sure with this particular wine. So let's look at the wine and smell it and evaluate it. What color do you guys get? What's the color that you're seeing here? How would you describe this color? David and Allison, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And Candy and Kathy and Kevin. Steve is with Heather. Oh, great. Good. Thank you. What color do you guys have tonight? I think I might have a little lag, and I apologize if that's the case. Carrie, thank you. Salmon colored. Yeah, Anthony's picking up on the salmon colored, Tony. It's pretty, that kind of salmony hue. It's obviously see-through, so it's a little bit lighter in that profile. Sometimes when you get something that's more saignée, you're getting something that's going to have a darker color to it, a reddish cast to it that this doesn't have. Kind of sometimes almost Kool-Aid, kind of cherry Kool-Aid kind of profile to it. This is more in that blush, as Heather's pointing out right now, medium salmon kind of profile. Pinky coral, I love that Swanberg. I'm assuming that's Adrian's comment as opposed to Jeff, but prove me wrong, Jeff, I'm fine with that either way. So this is already something that makes you think of an intentional rosé as opposed to a saignée rosé. So Bordeaux would be a place where you would have found kind of some of the first rosés. They would make a red wine, and in an attempt to concentrate that red wine, they would let some of the juice that was coming out and contacting with the skins run off or be separated from. So if you have a vat and you press the fruit into that vat and leave the skins there so that the color pigmentation is extracted into the wine and gives you tannin and profile and color, the resulting amount of juice that's in that vat is going to take up that color and that tannin extraction and that skin contact. So if you reduce the amount of juice, you have a greater proportion of juice, a greater proportion of skins to juice, and therefore more intentionally rich, robust, more extracted type of wine. So you could take some of that juice out after a small bit of contact, and it's colored. It's a rosé color, and it will have a very different profile than a wine that is made, say, like they do in Provence, where you'd pick the grapes at a certain degree of ripeness, probably less than you would for an actual red wine production, but you pick them and you soak the juice intentionally on the skins for 2, 4, 6, 8, sometimes a day, 24 hours, but hours, brief skin contact, just enough to pick up some color, aromatics, and a profile. It's more white wine than it is red in that case. And so the aromas help you, and the flavor profile helps you kind of distinguish between the two, generally. And there are variations here where there are, as I said earlier, another category where you might have a little bit of red wine that's just poured into a white wine. And I know a number of producers in Virginia have done that before, for example, where they've taken some Vidal white and they've added red Cabernet Franc juice to it, or Chambourcin juice to it, or something of that sort to make an interesting kind of blush rosé. So this color is more akin to an intentionally produced rosé. What do you smell? And love all the descriptors there. Kathy, your signature colors are blush and bashful. That's funny. Beautiful sunset from Jen, nice description there. And Erica, yes, absolutely pink diamonds. Allison, you're coming up with one of my favorite descriptors for rosé, and certainly for this type of rosé, watermelon Jolly Rancher. Absolutely. There's a really distinctive kind of, I mean, it's artificial watermelon flavor, that candied stuff, but it's also that the candied sugar element, the exterior kind of smell of the tackiness. Once you remove that wrapper, there's that smell that comes out of watermelon Jolly Rancher, and that's here. Pear, I for sure get that. Thank you, Kimberly. Yes. Cherry taffy, cherries, strawberry, red cherry, a little wet stone. Carrie, you're picking up some butter. I think power suggestion is a hugely important thing, and I get your butter now. Strawberries, watermelon, raspberry, peachy. It's like everything you want in the summertime, isn't it? It's all of the most wonderful smells that make you want to say rosé all day, just as you put it, Chris. Thank you. Peachy. Yeah, honeysuckle. It's aromatic. It's Sanders are with us tonight. Red Twizzlers. Ah, cool. Yes. So there's a candied element about this. There's an aromatic floral element about this. There's just straight fruit about it. There's artificial fruit too. I mean, there's that candy element, and then there's sort of concentrated fruit profile, which is really neat in a wine that, if you think about, if this is in fact a case where they let this juice sit on the skins for 2, 4, 6, 8, less than a day, and you get all of that aromatic profile and can maintain that in this, that's really neat. And that's one of the reasons why rosés aren't something you typically age, because you want to experience that freshness. Now, there are a number of rosés, Etna Rosados, wines from Italy, for example, that are made in a rosé form that have a little more savory character, have a little bit more, a little more pigmentation. They can age a couple of years, maybe a little longer. The great rosés that are made from Tavel, which is in the southern part of France, near Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and kind of in my mind, it's the Châteauneuf-du-Pape version of rosé. Those wines I've served certainly multiple years on, and they have a greater density. They have a more concentrated profile. And what's interesting there is some of the same grapes that are in Tavel are also in a Provençal rosé, but just the approach is very different. So Tavel's a space that never really made a great red, so they just started kind of picking with the intention of making everything into rosé, and now when you see Tavel on a label, you know it's going to be rosé. It has to be. So Heather's picking up a little bit of citrus, and it's pretty crisp. And Kathy's definitely on the watermelon Jolly Rancher train, which I think we all are. Oh, Jeff is saying this is reminiscent of the wine number 3 from the wine event. Very cool pickup. For the wine event, for those of you that don't know, he's referring to our spring wine buying event, where we had a rosé and sparkling table, and we were pouring 2 rosés at the table. One was a Provençal rosé, and the other one was a Basque rosé. And is the question that Kimberly's asking too, is the approach the same for a sparkling rosé? Yeah, in fact, a lot of sparkling rosé is made by tinting. So you'll have a white base. So you've got 3 varietals typically in Champagne, for example. You've got Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier are red-skinned grapes, and so you can get contact from those skins. And so you might make a base wine that has some of that skin contact that's red, and you would add that back to your base white wine that you're going to make then into a rosé. And That's where you get a lot of producers making a lot more volume that way because it's a lot easier to dial in exactly the color. We carry a wonderful wine from René Geoffroy Champagne that's Rosé de Saignée, and so it is actual skin contact with the Pinot Noir that they're pressing. So the Pinot Noir juice is left on the skins for a little bit and then bled off, Saignée style or bleeding style, and you get just what for me just tastes like a sparkling Burgundy. It's a beautiful expression. So you have all variations in the sparkling world like you do in the still world with respect to rosé. All right, so Jolly Rancher, whole host of fruits, some interesting buttered note. Anything kind of earthy? You get any minerality? Do you get anything savory? Anything herbal? Anything woody? That's a fun wine. Man, it's just perfect weather too. The last couple of days of warm temperatures have been begging for rosé, and we're just starting to get asparagus in, and ramps are coming in the restaurant. We got a wonderful lot of asparagus today from a producer that we've worked with in the past couple of years, Kevin from Seventh Heaven Farm. He also sells at the Warrenton Farmers Market. Beautiful, gorgeous purple and green asparagus. And I just want to have asparagus salads and asparagus dishes and sit outside with kind of chilled rosé and just eat and celebrate spring. All of which you can do at Field and Main at this point. Chalk and whetstone, definitely, yes. That whetstone element is nice. Johnny, you're seconding that point for sure. So I think, as I was mentioning in the beginning, if we were talking and we're doing this 10 years ago, most people would have assumed by seeing rosé in a glass that it would be sweet. Now, when you taste this, is this sweet? Where's the acid level at? What's the body level? How would you evaluate this? I'm not getting any indication from the nose that it would be sweet, and from the leg perspective, it's a relatively light wine. It's not necessarily holding strong on any legs or sheeting really fast and running quickly. And candy, yeah, that's quite right. As the wine warms up a little bit, you're going to get more aromas. The alcohol just kind of releases those esters, and you get a definite level of aroma that changes in a little bit more. So this is a wine that definitely, Jan, exactly, 100% salty. There's a minerality to it. There is this, we've talked about it before, like if you're in the ocean and you get a mouthful of salt water, the saltiness is there too, but there's also a viscosity that's in the mouth, a density of salt suspended in water. And this has sort of that. It's kind of, as Jeff and Adrian are pointing out, medium bodied. Yeah, it looks extremely light, but it has a density it's not full by any means, but it's definitely not a light wine. It's not water texture. It's more than that. It has that sort of salinity, salt and suspension kind of, yeah, it's beautiful. Or technically, as Anthony's pointing out, Tony is pointing out, it's delicious. So medium plus acid, absolutely, which is kind of to be expected from rosé like this, I think. It's dry though. Carrie's making the point, thank you. Really dry. There's no residual sugar here. And that is definitely, I would say, the grander style now, the style that is favored by most rosé producers. They might have a tiny bit of residual sugar, but most are not trying to make a sweet white Zinfandel-like rosé. Most are making dry rosés, and that is definitely what our guests are clamoring for and interested in. And so, crunchy acidity, that's a great way of putting it. Thank you, Kathy. Salinity, it's got body, like Jeff said, some light lees aging. Could be, right? So most often, I'm not picking up any oak profile, although that butter comment is very interesting. It's not oak, I don't think. I think that's more of a fermentation, perhaps. But most rosés not put in oak. It's not looking for anything that would mute or even kind of conflict or really even run tandem to all the fresh fruit aromatics. So it's oftentimes a wine that you're going to find in a neutral vessel pretty much all the time in stainless steel, but they could put a little bit of lees in it and give you a little contact with lees to give you some creaminess and some of that richness. Absolutely. And Carrie, yeah, I agree. Everybody is seemingly getting onto that bandwagon that it's really lovely. It's just a really beautiful wine. Rosés, I think for a long time, because they were sweet, but also because they're not red and they're not white, they were thought of as sort of an adjunct and not serious. And while this doesn't have to be taken seriously, it's a serious wine and it has complexity. We're chatting about it. It has enough to dig into, but you just kind of want to enjoy it too. The Sanders are pointing out that the wine, the fruit on the palate has sort of dissipated and kind of gone away the more that they've had sips of it. And I think I'm still getting kind of a retro-nasal, just an olfactory, almost wispy sense, almost like a smoky sense of the flavors from the watermelon Jolly Rancher still present there. The pear's not as prominent for me on the palate as it was in the nose. Some of the red fruit, of course, is still there, but it's more into that salinity, more into that textural experience and the acidity. It's almost like the lead in with the nose and the aromatics is not as much matched by what's on the palate, and thus it becomes just kind of alluring, and you kind of want to keep your nose in the glass and intermittently have a sip. All right, so if we're talking about places in the world and typical spots, we were talking about Provence, we were talking about Tavel, for example, we were talking about Bordeaux, just using France as an example. I mentioned Italy, obviously beautiful rosés made here in Virginia, gorgeous rosés made in California and Oregon and Washington, Chile, Argentina, Austria makes fantastic rosés, and so Spain, Rioja's making some wonderful Tempranillo rosés, right? So you can find rosé anywhere and everywhere, but what do you think we should be considering here? Kathy's asking a little bit about herb de Provence type aroma, so an herby element. Yeah. Candy's noting a touch of cooked peaches. That's a good call. Cooked peaches on the palate. Thank you for that. Yes, almost canned peaches. That soft kind of orange peach flavor. Tart red fruit though, some cranberry coming through for Michelle with a medium plus acidity. Yeah. So if we were looking at, let's just take France for example, and thinking about France, we're getting strawberry, kind of cherry, watermelon, as opposed to darker berries and currants, things of that sort. So I'm not headed to Bordeaux as much as I'm headed more toward Provence. So Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, but more likely probably Claret, Cinsault, Carignan perhaps. But Cinsault and Claret kind of end up their way into rosés quite a bit, and Grenache does a lot. And so I think we're probably in more Provence than we would be in Bordeaux, but this could be so Sangiovese, like for example, Sangiovese or a Sangiovese rosé would be a little bit, I think, a touch more kind of orangish, brownish, have a little bit more of a savory character to it. I think this seems not like an Etna Rosso, kind of Rosado, excuse me, where you'd have, I think, a darker color. Some beautiful, I mean, we have kind of just a simple Garnacha-based rosé from Spain that is spectacular, that has a similar color and profile. I think it's a bit spicier than this one is, but yeah, I mean, Jeff and Adrian and Bradley's saying he's in Provence and the Rhone. So in the Rhone, you could be, a Côte du Rhône rosé, and then I think you could go to Provence, and Côte du Rhône I think might be a little bit more intense in color than this, but you can find examples of it, and the grape varieties we're talking about here are going to be pretty much the same. So Senso, yeah, Nicole, absolutely. I think Senso is in the running potentially here, but Grenache and Senso and the warmer it gets, the more it expands too, and it becomes a little bit more alcoholic. So I think that kind of light to medium alcohol is for sure a medium bodied wine. 12.5, 13% alcohol. And with it being so dry and all those wonderful fruit characteristics, it's not super herbal. There is a little bit of that herb de Provence that Kathy's noting, right? But and some floral quality, but it's not all that, and you still get some of that ripe fruit. So the potential alcohol of something like this, I think, gives you an indication that as it goes dry and the flavor profiles that they've achieved, it's probably in that 12, 5, 13 range. I'll try it again. It's warming up quite a bit. That helped. That helped a lot. It's got a kind of got an orange peel, orange pith flavor in the palate. It's just developed for me, and pouring a little bit of colder liquid on top of what was getting warmer helped to kind of enliven and enrich this. So yeah, where's everybody kind of thinking? Are you thinking still Provence? I mean, that's, to be honest, when I got Watermelon Jolly Rancher, that was kind of where I started going first, and the color indicates that. And if we're going to do a rosé, we might as well do a Provence rosé. Like I said in the beginning too, this doesn't necessarily tell us much about where it's coming from specifically, but this is a cool closure, and they can certainly do this in Provence. And Eric, I understand very much that you want to be thinking about travel of any kind, but definitely travel to Provence to drink some rosé would be tremendous. It's high on the list. Michelle's saying that Olga is voicing an opinion for GSM or Sanso. Bradley's asking about Claret. Yeah, so if we're in Provence, Claret, Sanso, Grenache, maybe Mourvedre, maybe Syrah, but more likely the Sanso, the Claret, the Grenache type blend would be the typical grape varietals that you're going to find here. Kathy's going to continue to argue for Grenache Syrah Mourvedre in southern France. So you're in Provence, Kathy, or are you in the Rhone with kind of a GSM blend? Most are coming back strongly and resoundingly in France, and I think that's the right call. And that's the other thing about rosé that's challenging and difficult, certainly in a blind context. So many people emulate this style that if they've achieved it or get close to it, and that kind of makes it possible for rosé to be sort of made anywhere in this kind of profile and style. I'm not sure what the salinity element, and I think that's why I'm definitely staying in France, but I've had beautiful rosé variations that take on some of this character, especially in other places that specialize in growing grapes like Grenache and Sanso and Claret. So we have, and we consistently carry, a really beautiful Rhone-styled rosé blend from Texas, from McPherson, that is just like, it's a perennial favorite of all of ours. In fact, on Tuesday, we had a staff kind of picnic barbecue at our house here and served the McPherson rosé, and it was beautiful. It's more Provence-like. This year, though, it's a little bit richer. It's got a touch more color to it than this. So it would be easily identified, and it's definitely not this, but a beautiful wine for sure. So, all right, so we're in Provence. We're drinking rosé on a warm 80-plus degree day, and it's nearly May. This is not a bad way to be living, you know? Thank you very much. Ooh, Allison's outlining a definite perk of traveling and living and or spending some time in Provence. You just venture down the road, pick up a $5 rosé, pass the afternoon away. I think that's what, to me, I mean, I love that the category of rosé is now that. It's a category. It's a special space unto its own. I mean, 80+% of production in Provence is rosé, and then there's a small percentage of white and red to round out the remaining 100. But for me, the rosé, like the real benefit to rosé, I certainly love pairing with it. I love playing with it at the dinner table. But the best part about rosé is having it a day drink with rosé, like just sipping on a rosé with nothing else, no other cares in the world, having a picnic, having that kind of relaxed affair. So many other wines can be used for that, but rosé is just made for it. It just makes you slow down and appreciate the moment. It seems as though it's a fleeting moment that can be cherished. And I mean, rosé is now available much more around the year as opposed to just being a summertime beverage. But a rosé like this is for the moment, and this is awesome. So thank you for sharing this moment with me. All right, let's go for it. I think 2019, 2020, rosé from, I think I'm probably going to say, yeah, 2020 maybe. Some 19s and 20s are in the country. This year's a little weird from a rosé standpoint in terms of vintage because of COVID and because of the tariffs that were put up, and so some things weren't ready to come in yet. Some things were ready and were held because of taxes. So we're kind of dancing around with 18s, 19s, 20s. I think that's kind of the neat part about some of these rosés. Some of them have a little bit of staying power. So I'm going to say 2020 Provence rosé. Let's see. Oh yeah, Domaine de Nizas. This is a François Lurton project. This is in the Languedoc, so in southern France. This is Syrah 40%, Grenache 30%, Mourvedre 30%. So a higher percentage of Syrah than I was expecting. The color's not super dark, and oftentimes you see a little bit more darkness in the way of the Syrah. It's neat. The back label notes that the terroir of Pézenas is one of the most complex in France. Bordered to the east by the Hérault River, which brings in freshness. It's also sheltered from strong winds by the Montagne Noire in the north. It's a blend of Syrah, Grenache, and Mourvedre. Balance of minerality. That minerality is certainly present. And guys, way off on my side. This is 14.5% alcohol. 14.5. It wears its alcohol extremely well. Gosh, if you were sipping on this all day, you're going to feel it after a minute. Especially a little sunshine. Wow. And Robert, you're 100% correct. This was the rosé that was in number 2. So this was one of our buying wine features, which is pretty neat. So Tony slipped that into the buying event and also slipped that into our tasting, which means he had this on the tasting. He had this picked out for tonight well before the buying event was put together. But wow, I'm not feeling any of the heat from this, but I think you'll feel it a little later. That's delicious. This is maybe one of the best examples we've had in a year of tasting together where alcohol is not as perceptible as it actually is. It is hiding it beautifully, and for a rosé to do that is really unique. That's awesome. I'm not sure how they managed that, but certainly have, and it's pretty special. So really cool, which means we can get more of this if you're interested, and I think we've been selling it also by the bottle retail, and it's in our wine list, I think, as well. So he just slid that one in there. It's great. I don't know, Chris, to your question about the alcohol statement, do I trust it? It certainly doesn't taste 14.5, but it is listed as such right there, which, wow. I mean, I guess they could have put it high, and it's less, so it could be less, but that's pretty high. Maybe it's just a mistake. And it tastes different to you, Erica, from Saturday's wine? Because Erica was at the tasting. Maybe it's just because of the different context. I mean, we were tasting with a whole bunch of other wines, and this one is getting its own precious moment in time. This is it's pretty great. Well, I guess I can't spend the rest of the evening probably finishing this. That would incapacitate me in my other duties for the evening. But these are pretty special nevertheless, so I'll put it in the fridge and have a little bit for the next day and see how it holds up. And yeah, Kathy, you're right. Tariffs were weren't tariffs less on higher alcohol? I don't remember how that went. There was something about how you had to label something because it would get in a different way. So maybe they inflated the alcohol percentage here just to get it in that regard. And this has nothing to do with it being 14.5. They just changed the label for that reason. That's pretty cool. That might be the case. Maybe this is historically labeled that way. And if you're a collector of labels and wine history, this might have historical significance because it was changed in order to get around a tariff. And so, yeah, that would make a greater explanation than the reality that this was actually 14.5% alcohol. So I would be hard pressed to believe it. So, well, folks, a wonderful week again. I will see you next week as we do this one more time. Continue to do that week after week. Thank you very much for joining me, and for contributing all your thoughts. And thank you so much for all those of you who were able to attend the buying event. I think we had a great time. It was a great showing. Some really fun wines, and Tony should have those in here the next week or so. If you had ordered any, we'll be in contact with you shortly. So until next week, or until I see some of you before then, cheers to all. Thank you.